Okay, today we slow down for a moment. In a world that moves faster than our thoughts, where the glow of screens never fades and the noise of opinions fills every corner, it is easy to forget the quiet space within. Maybe you've been there lying, awake at 2 a.m., replaying conversations, wondering if the life you're living is truly your own. The pace outside feels unstoppable, yet something inside whispers for you to pause. What if there was a mirror not for your face, but for your mind? Would you have the courage to look into it, to see the truth without disguise? Welcome to Stoic Dharma, a place to explore ancient wisdom through modern life. Today, we'll step into a practice that has shaped great thinkers and guided countless lives. Why self-reflection is the key to meaningful life. Self-reflection, in the lens of Stoic philosophy, is not a passing thought or a fleeting self-evaluation. It is the deliberate act of turning the gaze inward, the quiet discipline of observing your own mind as though it belonged to someone else. To the Stoics, this was not indulgence, it was a survival skill. In the chaos of ancient Rome, life was loud. Markets overflowed with merchants, politics boiled with ambition, and soldiers marched through streets heavy with the dust of conquest. Yet amid this clamor, the Stoics sought stillness. They believed that meaning could not be found by chasing every impulse or responding to every provocation, but by understanding oneself fully and adjusting the sails of life accordingly. Self-reflection was their way of reclaiming control over the one realm no one could invade, the inner world. It is a kind of archaeology of the self, brushing away the dust of distraction to uncover the foundations of our values, motives, and fears. Like an ancient artifact buried beneath centuries of neglect, our truest intentions wait for us to uncover them. From here, we turn to the essence of why self-reflection holds such power. The Stoics saw life as a current we cannot always control. Storms come, tides shift, and winds turn without our consent. But through reflection, we adjust our position on the boat. We learn which ropes to tighten, which sails to lower. It is not the water we master, it is the way we navigate it. Now imagine your life as a vast landscape. Without reflection, you move through it like a traveler without a map, reacting to whatever terrain appears, never sure if you're heading toward the mountain's peak or deeper into the swamp. With reflection, however, you begin to see the landmarks. You recognize the paths you've taken before, the ones that led you to dead ends, and the ones that carried you closer to the view you seek. But there's another layer to this practice that the Stoics understood well. Self-reflection is not only about identifying mistakes. It's about understanding why we make them. It is about noticing the patterns in our thoughts and behaviors that either align with or betray our principles. Seneca once noted that we suffer more in imagination than in reality. Through reflection, we see how often our fears are self-created, how much of our distress comes not from events, but from our interpretation of them. Consider this: every decision you have ever made began in the mind. Every triumph, every regret rooted in thoughts you may not have examined closely at the time. Self-reflection invites you to slow down enough to see those thoughts as they arise, to test them against your values before letting them guide your actions. It is like holding each idea up to the light, checking for cracks before building anything upon it. In the modern world, where speed is celebrated and silence is rare, this practice feels almost rebellious. We are urged to react instantly to the news, to messages, to opportunities and threats alike. The Stoics would tell us to wait, to breathe, to understand ourselves before moving forward, because a life lived without reflection is like a ship at sea without a rudder. It may still move, but it drifts wherever the wind decides. And so, self-reflection becomes the key to intentional living. It helps you choose your course rather than be carried along by the strongest current. It allows you to recognize when your ambitions serve your true nature and when they are just noise from the crowd. It teaches you that not every desire deserves pursuit, and not every fear warrants retreat. One of the profound strengths of Stoic self-reflection lies in its simplicity. You do not need rare tools or elaborate rituals, only the willingness to be honest with yourself. Marcus Aurelius wrote his reflections at the end of each day, not for anyone else to read, but to remind himself of what mattered. He reviewed his actions, his thoughts, and his responses, not with self-condemnation, but with a craftsman's eye for refinement. The question was never am I perfect, but am I closer to the person I want to be than I was yesterday? From here, we can see why self-reflection is as much about compassion as it is about discipline. It is not a weapon to punish yourself with, it is a tool to understand, to realign, and to grow. When done honestly, it illuminates the blind spots that cause us to stumble. When done consistently, it shapes us into beings who act with integrity, regardless of circumstance. In moments of stillness, when you set aside the noise of the world, self-reflection feels almost like speaking with a wiser version of yourself. A version who sees past the urgency of today's problems and understands the arc of your life. This inner dialogue becomes a compass, gently reminding you of the direction you have chosen, even when the path becomes unclear. But perhaps the most transformative aspect of self-reflection is that it returns your life to you. In the rush to meet expectations, to keep pace, to do and achieve, it is easy to hand over your days to forces outside your control. Reflection is the act of taking them back, of standing in the quiet center of your own being and deciding, with clarity, how you will live. And so, we come to a question the Stoics might ask: are you truly living, or are you merely existing? Self-reflection gives you the tools to answer honestly. It does not guarantee comfort, but it promises meaning. It does not remove the storms, but it teaches you to steer. It will not hand you the map, but it will give you the eyes to read it. This is the power the Stoics found in turning inward, a quiet, persistent force that shapes a life not from the outside in, but from the inside out. A force available to you now, in this very moment, if you choose to pause, look within, and listen. To understand the roots of Stoic self-reflection, we must first step back into a world far removed from ours yet strangely similar in its turbulence. Ancient Rome, at the height of its power, was not a place of constant peace and grandeur as the marble statues might suggest. It was a place of political upheaval, sudden shifts in fortune, and a relentless reminder that even the most powerful could lose everything in a moment. It was in this unpredictable world that Stoicism took root. Founded by Zeno of Citium in the early 3rd century BCE, the school of thought spread through Greece and later flourished in Rome. The Stoics understood that they could not control the storms of politics, the rise and fall of empires, or the inevitability of death. But they could control how they met these events with clarity, reason, and virtue. This is where self-reflection became essential. For the Stoics, the mind was a fortress that must be tended daily. Without discipline, the gates would be thrown open to fear, anger, and greed. With discipline, it became a sanctuary where wisdom could take root. Reflection was the daily act of walking the inner walls, checking for cracks, and repairing what needed repair. Now imagine the figure of Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome, seated by lamplight in a military tent far from the marble halls of the capital. Outside, the Danube frontier is cold and restless. Inside, he writes in his journal not decrees, not orders, but notes to himself. He reminds himself to be patient, to see beyond the petty provocations of others, to live as nature intended. These writings, now known as meditations, were never meant for anyone else. They were his mirror, his nightly act of self-reflection. From here, we turn to Seneca, the philosopher-statesman. His life was filled with both privilege and danger, serving as tutor to Emperor Nero before falling out of favor. He advised the practice of reviewing each day in the quiet before sleep, asking where he had acted according to reason, where he had failed, and how he might improve tomorrow. To Seneca, reflection was not a sterile intellectual exercise, it was the art of moral refinement. Epictetus, born a slave, brought yet another dimension to Stoic reflection. He knew firsthand the limits of control. His freedom had been denied, his body injured, yet he taught that the mind remains sovereign. Through self-examination, a person could rise above any circumstance, shaping their inner life even when the outer life was bound. He urged his students to measure their progress not by wealth or status, but by the mastery of their own judgments and desires. But there's another layer to this history. The Stoics were not alone in their pursuit of self-knowledge. In the same centuries, far across the world, Eastern traditions were cultivating similar practices. In the Upanishads of Hindu philosophy, seekers were urged to turn inward, to find the Atman, the true self beyond the distractions of the senses. Early Buddhist teachings emphasized mindfulness and the careful observation of thought as a path to liberation from suffering. These traditions, though separated by geography and culture, shared a common truth that without self-awareness, freedom is an illusion. The Stoics expressed this truth through the language of reason and virtue. The Eastern sages through the language of detachment and awakening. Both recognized that the unexamined mind is easily led astray. In the archaeological ruins of ancient Stoic schools, we find little in the way of grand temples or ornate symbols. Their legacy is not built of stone, but of words preserved in scrolls, etched in the thoughts of their students, carried forward in the quiet habits of reflection. Unlike monumental architecture, these habits were meant to be lived, not admired from afar. The practice was simple in form, but profound in effect. The Stoics encouraged their followers to pause, often at the end of the day, and write down or think through the events that had passed. They would note where their emotions had flared, where they had been patient, where they had acted with integrity. The aim was not perfection, but progress and ongoing alignment between values and actions. This regular examination also served another purpose. It built resilience. In times of crisis, a mind accustomed to reflection could respond with steadiness. When others panicked, the reflective person could recall past trials, see the larger picture, and act without haste. Reflection became a storehouse of lessons learned, ready to be drawn upon when the world turned uncertain. Now imagine a Roman citizen walking through the forum after hearing news of a sudden political purge. Fear ripples through the crowd, but he has practiced the Stoic habit of inward turning. He recalls that fortune is fickle, that possessions and status can vanish overnight, but character remains. He examines his own readiness for loss and, finding himself anchored, continues with calm. From here, we can understand why the Stoics considered self-reflection not a luxury, but a necessity. To live without it was to live at the mercy of every external change. To live with it was to walk through chaos with an inner order intact. There's an enduring relevance here for the modern world. We, too, live in a time of volatility, though our battles are fought in digital spaces, in economic cycles, and in the shifting landscapes of culture. The ancient tools still fit the modern hand. A quiet space, a pen, a mind willing to be honest, these are all we need to step into the same stream of reflection that flowed through the lives of Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, and Epictetus. And so, the roots of Stoic self-reflection are deep, nourished by centuries of discipline and tested by lives lived in uncertainty. They stretch across cultures and philosophies, proving that the act of looking inward is a universal human need. The soil may change, but the seed remains the same: to know oneself, to live in harmony with reason, and to walk with virtue through whatever comes. Self-reflection, for all its depth, means little if it remains trapped in thought. The Stoics knew that contemplation without application was like a seed left in a sealed jar full of potential, but lifeless without soil, water, and sunlight. They were not philosophers of idle theory, they were builders of character, and the blueprint meant nothing unless it was lived. From here, we turn to the bridge between knowing and doing. Reflection is the lantern that illuminates the path, but it does not walk the road for us. Every insight gained through looking inward is an invitation to act differently in the world. The Stoics practiced this translation of thought into habit with precision. Consider Marcus Aurelius again, alone at his writing desk. His words about patience and restraint were not written as abstract ideals. They were instructions to himself, to be followed in the Senate, in the court, on the battlefield. His meditations were a living document, a call to enact wisdom in the noise of daily life. The same was true for Seneca, who saw each evening's review as a preparation for tomorrow's challenges. In the modern world, this step is perhaps the most difficult. It is easy to read, to think, to analyze endlessly. It is harder to speak with kindness in the middle of an argument, to hold your temper when provoked, to make choices that align with your highest principles when nobody is watching. Action requires courage, and courage grows from practice. Let us start with the realm of work. Reflection might reveal that you are driven more by fear of failure than by love of the craft. It might show you that certain tasks drain your spirit, while others bring it alive. Acting on this means setting boundaries, refining skills, and directing your energy toward what aligns with your values. It means resisting the temptation to measure your worth by comparison, choosing instead to master your own lane. In personal relationships, reflection often uncovers patterns, moments when pride silences apology, when insecurity fuels jealousy, when haste turns words into weapons. Turning insight into action here means adjusting your approach, pausing before responding, listening more than speaking, replacing suspicion with curiosity. These changes are not dramatic in a single day, but over time they transform the soil of connection, allowing trust to grow. On the level of inner life, reflection shows you the subtle chains you carry. Perhaps it is the need for approval, the attachment to a certain outcome, or the reflex to imagine worst-case scenarios. The Stoics recommended negative visualization, mentally rehearsing loss or challenge not as a way to dwell on misfortune, but to prepare the mind for reality. This practice strengthens the inner structure so that when life shifts, you remain steady. But there's another layer here. Acting on reflection often means accepting discomfort. When you realize that a long-held habit is corrosive, change will feel unfamiliar. The mind clings to the known, even if it causes harm. The Stoics embraced this discomfort as a sign of growth. Just as a blacksmith tempers steel through heat, they believed the soul is tempered by facing what is difficult and living in alignment with truth. Now imagine starting each morning with a short review of your intentions, drawn from last night's reflections. Perhaps you write down a single virtue to practice that day: patience in traffic, honesty in conversation, moderation in consumption. At the end of the day, you return to your notes, comparing intention with reality. This feedback loop becomes a quiet revolution. Over weeks and months, small, deliberate actions compound into lasting change. From here, we can explore a few Stoic-inspired techniques for turning reflection into action, journaling with purpose, not simply recording events, but noting the thoughts and feelings behind them, and outlining one concrete step for improvement. Morning premeditation, visualizing the potential difficulties of the day ahead, preparing your mind to meet them with virtue. Evening review, asking where you acted well, where you faltered, and what you can adjust tomorrow. Voluntary discomfort, practicing simplicity or restraint in small ways to strengthen resilience and gratitude. These practices are not about chasing perfection. They are about closing the gap between who you are and who you want to be. Each act of alignment, however small, reinforces the architecture of your character. But the Stoics would caution against measuring progress by external applause. The true test is whether your actions match your values when no one is there to see them. Self-reflection guides you to this inner consistency. Action proves it. In the noise of modern life, where distractions are endless and gratification is instant, it is tempting to treat reflection as an escape, a quiet island to retreat to when the world feels overwhelming. Yet the Stoics invite us to bring the clarity we find there back into the storm. They would say, do not just think differently, live differently. Consider Epictetus's students, leaving his lectures and returning to the bustle of the marketplace. They carried his words not as slogans, but as tools. When a merchant cheated them, they remembered to guard their judgment. When illness came, they recalled that the body is mortal, but the mind can remain free. The lessons they reflected upon became the shape of their days. There is a quiet satisfaction in living this way. You begin to trust yourself not because you will never err, but because you will notice quickly when you do and adjust course. Your life becomes a series of small, intentional corrections, each one steering you toward the horizon you have chosen. And so, turning reflection into action is the heart of the Stoic path. Without action, self-knowledge is little more than a well-lit room you never enter. With action, each insight becomes a stone in the foundation of a life lived with purpose. You move from drifting to steering, from reacting to directing, from knowing to being. This is where the Stoic journey deepens, not in grand declarations, but in the quiet, daily work of embodying what you have discovered within. It is the patient art of aligning thought and deed, day after day, until the two are indistinguishable. Each day is a chapter in a book that only you will ever read from the first page to the last. Some chapters are marked by triumph, others by loss, and many pass quietly, leaving little trace except in memory. Yet the Stoics would remind us that every day holds an opportunity for learning if we are willing to pause, reflect, and act. From here, we turn to the essential lesson. Self-reflection is not an ornament for the mind, it is the steering wheel of the soul. Without it, we drift, carried by the strongest currents of habit, culture, and impulse. With it, we navigate with intention, even when the waters grow rough. The Stoics understood that time is our most precious resource, and reflection helps us spend it well. A day without self-examination, they would say, a day lived half-conscious. You may have worked, spoken, and moved through the world, but without reflection, you cannot be sure if those actions aligned with your deeper values or merely served the demands of the moment. But there's another layer here. Reflection alone is not enough. The Stoics warned against becoming trapped in endless introspection, turning inward so often that you never step forward. Just as a sailor must sometimes leave the safety of harbor, so must we leave the quiet of contemplation to live and test our principles. To look back without moving forward is to confuse thought with life. From this balance emerges one of the most powerful lessons. Self-reflection must be paired with self-compassion. Without compassion, reflection becomes self-criticism, and self-criticism can harden into self-contempt. The Stoics were disciplined, but they were not cruel to themselves. They knew that growth is slow and that each misstep is part of the path. A harsh voice in the mind will not keep you steady in the storm. A steady voice will. Now imagine a life lived with this balance. Each morning begins with a conscious intention, small, clear, and realistic. Throughout the day, you hold that intention like a compass. At night, you review without judgment. Did I follow my compass? If not, what pulled me away? Was it fear, distraction, impatience? And what can I do tomorrow to adjust my course? Over years, this simple rhythm becomes a way of life, a quiet source of meaning. The practical effect is profound. In work, reflection might teach you to focus on quality over speed, integrity over advantage. In relationships, it might guide you to listen more deeply, to choose understanding over the need to be right. In personal challenges, it might give you the strength to see hardship as training rather than punishment. From here, we can distill a few enduring lessons from the Stoic practice of reflection. Clarity before action. Reflection clears the fog of impulse, revealing the choice that aligns with your values. Resilience through preparation. Visualizing difficulty makes you less fragile when it arrives. Freedom through awareness. Noticing your own patterns gives you the power to change them. Peace through acceptance. Recognizing what is within your control and releasing what is not. But perhaps the deepest lesson is that meaning is not something you stumble upon fully formed. It is built, day by day, through choices that reflect who you wish to become. The Stoics saw life as a craft. Each thought is a tool. Each action is a stroke of the artisan's hand. Self-reflection is the moment you step back from the work to see the whole, to judge the balance, to decide where to shape next. There is also a wider ripple. When you live with reflection, you affect more than your own path. You change the way you move through the world, the way you respond to others, the energy you bring into every space. Without intending to, you become an example of calm in tension, of patience in haste, of integrity in compromise, and sometimes, without ever knowing it, you give someone else permission to do the same. The Stoics would urge us to remember that life is brief and unpredictable. We cannot choose how long we will walk the road, but we can choose how we walk it. Self-reflection ensures that our steps are deliberate, that we do not waste the journey chasing what will not last. Now imagine yourself years from now. Looking back, what will you remember? The moments of pure presence, when you acted in harmony with your values, will stand out more than the possessions or titles you gathered. These moments are built through reflection, through the gentle but firm discipline of checking in with yourself and adjusting your course. And so, the lesson is simple, but not easy. Live each day as if you will account for it to your own soul before you sleep. Not to judge harshly, but to ensure you have lived it as fully, wisely, and kindly as you could. From here, the circle closes. Reflection naturally leads to action, and action, when carried out with awareness, deepens reflection. This rhythm is not a weight to carry, but a rare and enduring gift. It keeps you awake in the flow of your own life. It transforms living from a series of automatic motions into a deliberate art. It ensures that, when you one day look back, you will not be left wondering where the years disappeared, because you will have been fully present for each moment that passed. Self-reflection becomes your steering wheel, guiding your direction, your compass, keeping you aligned with what truly matters, and your map, showing you the terrain of your inner world. More than a tool, it is the quiet confidence that no matter how the winds shift or the waters rise, you are not drifting in someone else's story. You are not living under the weight of fear, fashion, or borrowed dreams. You are shaping a life that is unmistakably your own, one crafted with intention, anchored in your values, and illuminated by the awareness that each step is both chosen and cherished. Self-reflection is not an escape from life. It is the compass that allows us to walk through it with clarity. The Stoics understood that without knowing ourselves, we drift with every current, chasing what does not matter and losing sight of what does. Through daily mindfulness and honest introspection, you reclaim the power to align your actions with your deepest values. If this journey into ancient wisdom has sparked a thought or opened a question within you, carry it forward. Let it shape one choice you make today. That is how transformation begins quietly, but profoundly. Thank you for joining us on Stoic Dhamma. If you found this meaningful, consider subscribing, leaving a reflection in the comments, or sharing this with someone who seeks a calmer, truer life. In our next episode, we will explore desire, power, control, and love in the age of emotional detachment.
References 1. Aurelius, M. 2006. Meditations, G. Hayes, trans. Modern Library. Point 2. Seneca. 2010, Letters from a Stoic, R. Campbell, trans. Penguin Classics. Point 3. Irvine, W. B. 2009. A Guide to the Good Life, The Ancient Art of Stoic Joy. Oxford University Press.